Rob sat by the window, absent-mindedly staring at one point. Today marks a year since his beloved wife Lynn passed away, and he still couldn't believe it. A sudden heart failure ended the life of the young woman and became a real tragedy for Rob. Memories didn't give him peace, and every time took him back to the happy times when they were together. Rob met Lynn right after his graduation from medical school. This chance encounter in the park turned the young man's measured life upside down. Lynn came from a village to conquer the city, dreaming of becoming a fashion designer. For now, she worked as a seamstress and rented a tiny apartment on the outskirts. Rob's heart melted from the kindness, tenderness, and genuine sincerity of the provincial beauty. They only talked for a week, but Rob, falling in love like a boy, realized that Lynn had completely captured his thoughts. After several meetings, he proposed to her. The couple lived soul to soul for 8 years. The only thing that upset the young family very much was the absence of children. The cause of infertility remained unknown until the end. Just after the wedding glasses rang, the newlyweds were already dreaming of 2, or better yet 3 children. But it didn't happen. Examinations and treatment in clinics did not give results. Despite everything, Lynn and Rob did not lose hope. They also dreamed of their own house by the lake, spacious and cozy. All hopes and dreams collapsed when Lynn's heart stopped. And Rob was not at home then. He was not even in the city. The young doctor had been on an internship abroad for almost a year. Video calls with his wife didn't stop for a day, but the distance between them played a cruel joke. It became even more painful to think that Lynn never complained about her health. And as they say, nothing foreshadowed trouble. With the death of his wife, Rob was left only with warm memories and of course photos where they were both alive and looking at each other with loving eyes. The man returned to the photos on his phone every day and couldn't get enough of them. Every shot seemed infinitely familiar and priceless to him. Rob had long wanted to create a large album of their family photos with Lynn, as in the old good times. Finally today he decided to start this. First he needed to select the best photos for the album. Rob turned on the old laptop that Lynn liked to spend time with and began to upload photos from his phone to the screen. Suddenly, in the corner of the screen, he accidentally noticed a folder called Favorite Moments, created by his wife. He opened it and was stunned. He had not seen these shots before. Rob seemed to relive the touching moments in which he and Lynn were captured. "Thank you, dear, for everything," he whispered. Suddenly the man came across a strange shot where his wife was sitting on the bed, holding a large children's toy car in her hands. "Oh, that's unexpected. We don't have children's toys, although we really dream of having a child in our family. Well, maybe she went to a friend's birthday who has a child and bought a toy for the occasion," Rob guessed. Looking closely at the image in the photo, he noticed a sheet of paper lying on the edge of the bed. He zoomed in and saw that it was not just a sheet, but a photo of a little boy. Strange. Why did she need this? Rob wondered. The next shots made him shudder, and a lump rolled to his throat from suddenly overflowing tears. In one of the photos, Lynn was not alone, but with a young man. And in another photo, they hugged, standing together with the same child as in the previous photo. Did Lynn have a second family, and did she hide it from me? I can't believe it, Rob exclaimed in frustration. He closed the laptop in despair, unable to look further. He couldn't sleep at night. A feeling of bitterness and incomprehension had robbed Rob of his peace. It was only in the morning that he was able to forget. He dreamt of Lynn. At first she was in his arms, but then she turned into a bird and flew away. Rob woke up with a broken heart and a headache, unable to think of anything else but yesterday's photographs. Rob and Lynn had always had a golden rule: never to pry into each other's personal belongings. Even after Lynn's death, Rob didn't allow himself to break the established tradition. Lynn's things remained in their usual places. However, curiosity and emotional turmoil didn't allow Rob to calm down. In the end, he couldn't resist and opened the drawer of the writing desk where Lynn kept her personal documents. It was hard for him to look at things that her delicate hands had once touched. He didn't even realize how he would live without his beloved. This pain was sharper than a razor and unlikely to ever dull. Unexpectedly, among the other documents, a child adoption form caught his eye. "Oh my God, what is this?" Rob exclaimed. Lynn never mentioned adoption. They still had hope of having their own child, and everything would have worked out if... A wave of despair washed over Rob. This was always the case when he remembered their shared dreams and plans that were never meant to come true. One thing Rob knew for sure was that Lynn would never have made an important decision alone. All questions concerning the two of them were decided together, but something made Lynn sign the adoption form. "What should I do? How difficult it is without you, Lynn, but I must find out everything." Rob's heart told him that his wife was going to tell him something important, but she didn't have time. Adoption, where could it be? Rob wondered. Well, of course, in an orphanage. This would be our next step with Lynn if the doctors gave us the final verdict that we couldn't have children. The decision to go to the orphanage came lightning fast. The man didn't put it off. Time flew by unnoticed during the journey, and now Rob was standing at the doorstep of an old and shabby orphanage building. "Who are you here to see? Do you have an appointment?" the guard asked harshly, looking down. "I am here to see the director. I need to talk to her," Rob replied confidently. "Well, I don't know. We're very strict about this, and we don't just let anyone in from the street. But wait a minute, I'll call her on the phone," the guard replied. His sense of responsibility was clearly not in question. "You're lucky you came just in time. Mrs. McGuinness is still here, and she is willing to see you. Go up to the second floor. The director's office is on the left down the corridor." "Hello, how can I help you?" said the middle-aged woman with a pleasant appearance and a very kind smile that could melt any heart. These are the people who should work in an orphanage, Rob thought. "Young man, are you here about adoption? What's your name?" the director asked again, sensing that the visitor didn't know where to start the conversation. "I'm sorry, I was lost in thought. My name is Rob Dewar. Yes, about adoption. That is, not exactly," the man said, becoming flustered again. "Can you tell me if my wife, Lynn Dewar, came to see you last year?" "Let's take a look. We have records of visitors in our archive. I'm afraid I will disappoint you. No, she didn't come. Although many adoptions have been processed in the last year, there was also a refusal to take a child." "A strange refusal," Mrs. McGuinness said significantly. "Why strange?" Rob was interested. "Well, because a woman without any explanation gave her own 8-year-old son to the orphanage. Usually we get refusals from maternity hospitals, children from troubled families or children whose parents die or died under different circumstances. And here, a living, apparently healthy woman just came and gave her child away. In my practice, it's almost the first time something like this has happened." Yes, how heartless people can be. Rob agreed with her thoughts. Suddenly the door opened and a thin boy ran in. His high-pitched child's voice filled the entire space of the large office. "Mrs. McGuinness, can I not go outdoors today? My tutor is making me, but I don't have time. I still need to finish my craft for the competition." As Rob looked at the boy, he felt as if he had been struck by an electric shock. He had seen this child somewhere before, and very recently at that. "Oh my God, Rob realised this is the boy from Lynn's pictures that he was looking at yesterday and came here for. Rob was so lost in thought that he didn't notice the boy approaching him and staring at him with big grey eyes. Suddenly the boy asked, "Are you my dad by any chance?" Rob wasn't expecting such a question and was completely lost, not knowing how to answer. "Cody, go to your room. You can't interfere in adult conversations." "Okay, I'll allow you to skip the daytime walk today." Upon hearing these words, the boy smiled and disappeared behind the door of the office. Don't take it seriously. That's how kids in orphanages are. Regardless of their age, they dream of having a family. They see a dad in every man who comes and a mum in every woman. And this boy is special. He's the child I just told you about. He was placed in an orphanage without explanation. Rob turned pale and froze. He had many questions but no answers. Okay, someone put this child in an orphanage. But what does my wife have to do with it? How do I unravel this mess without you, Lynn? Mrs. McGinnis noticed the paleness and agitation. "What's wrong with you? Would you like some water?" No need, everything's fine. Please tell me, what's the name of the woman who gave Cody away to the orphanage? It's significant for me to know." The director looked at Rob in surprise. She couldn't understand why this strange man had come here and what he wanted to get here. She shouldn't just reveal confidential information to him out of the blue, but Mrs. McGinnis caught herself thinking that she didn't want to refuse him, simply because Rob didn't look happy and there was some inexplicable sadness in his eyes. So Mrs. McGinnis simply nodded in agreement. "Okay, let me check." Found it. The woman who wrote a refusal for Cody is named Judith Rossi. "Judith?" Rob asked incredulously. "Yes? Do you know her?" "No, I don't," he answered immediately, but he lied. Of course he knew Judith Rossi. She was his ex-girlfriend, the one before Lynn. Judith noticed him first in college and fell in love. Rob just got carried away, nothing more. He didn't fall in love with her, and Judith knew that, but didn't want to believe it. She tried every possible way to win the affection of the guy she liked. "Rob, are you busy tonight? Maybe we could go to the theatre or a cafe together. And on weekends we could go to the countryside. There's such a fun group gathering there. What do you think?" At first, Rob waved off Judith like a pesky fly, but one day he got tired of it and agreed to the girl's proposals, just to use her as a remedy for boredom. Then Rob met Lynn, fell madly in love, and completely forgot about Judith. The girl didn't give up without a fight and made many attempts to win Rob back, but all of them were in vain. Rob didn't want to hear anything. When Judith found out that Rob was getting married, she went crazy and shouted after him, "You'll regret it bitterly, and you'll never be happy." A few days later, the girl disappeared from Rob's life. He was very happy about it and immediately forgot about Judith. After all, he had a new life with his beloved Lynn. Now, years later, what happened between him and Judith flashed brightly in his mind, especially her last words. Rob was horrified because they really turned out to be prophetic. He rushed out of the orphanage like he had been scalded. A swarm of thoughts raced through his mind, which he couldn't put together. Lynn's ridiculous death, her photos with Judith's child, whom she gave to the orphanage. Try as he might, Rob couldn't understand or connect the events that had happened. One thing he knew for sure was that he needed to find Judith. Rob was almost certain that she held the key to the solution. Surprisingly, he still remembered Judith's address, tucked away in the corners of his memory. It was easy to find the old 5-story building that he hadn't visited in almost a decade. After a piercingly loud ring, a middle-aged woman opened the door and looked surprised at Rob. "Who are you looking for?" she asked. "Is Judith Rossi here? She used to live here," Rob replied, realizing that the woman in front of him was not Judith. I don't know anyone like that, sorry, the woman replied. However, seeing the desperation on Rob's face, she added, Wait, let me ask my husband. Maybe he knows. Ben, have you heard of Judith Rossi? A male voice came from the depths of the room. Oh, Kate, have you forgotten? We bought this apartment from Judith Rossi about a year ago. And who's asking? Apparently nobody, the woman said, looking after Rob as he ran down the stairs. Outside, Rob sat on a bench and hugged his head, buzzing like a beehive from today's events. Well, that's a dead end. Where do I look for Judith now? And maybe no one needs to be searched for to find out, to dig up the past. Why, Lynn won't come back anyway. Yes, that's exactly what needs to be done, thought Rob. In a depressed mood, he returned home. Earlier, Lynn's cheerful laughter could be heard here, and the house was filled with comfort, warmth, and happiness. And now, what? Emptiness. The grey walls and ceiling pressed on Rob with terrible force. He collapsed weakly on the couch and immediately fell asleep. Lynn appeared in his dream. They were walking toward each other. Lynn was so beautiful in a long sky blue dress, walking through a field strewn with wild flowers. She took a little boy by the hand. When Lynn reached Rob, she whispered only one word to him. Don't give up. And then the girl disappeared, turning into flowers in the field. Rob woke up immediately and said to himself, I won't give up. I promise. And it seems like I know what to do. He remembered his classmate, Sasha, who had dreamed of working in the police since school, and now he was a detective on especially important cases. That sign was on the door of the office where Rob went, not for service but for friendship. Sasha gathered the necessary information which, to put it mildly, surprised. Instead of the address of Judith's residence, he received information about her death from cancer about a year ago. Around this time, Judith gave her child to an orphanage. Rob also learned that Judith had an older brother named Peter, who was convicted of a series of thefts, served his sentence and lived in a settlement outside the city, and he was probably the only person who could tell what happened. Rob had no doubts about whether to go to Peter or not. The decision came on its own. He just took a ticket on the nearest train and went to the village. Peter's house was solid and strong, with a red roof, standing out from a row of identical grey houses. Rob stopped near the entrance to the house and looked at it curiously. Do you like it? A rough masculine voice was heard behind Rob. I built it all with my own hands. Rob turned around and saw an unshaven, casually dressed man who did not look very friendly. What are you standing there for, shifting from foot to foot? Come into the house if you've come, he said. Yes, actually, Rob stuttered hesitantly, embarrassed by such a greeting, but followed the owner into the house. Who are you? Peter asked as soon as Rob crossed the threshold of the house. I'm Rob. Who? Peter rudely interrupted him. So you're the one who ruined my sister's life. You deceived the girl and left her. And you framed your wife, Lynn. I wanted to hate her at first, but I couldn't. She turned out to be a good person, but she didn't get what she deserved. And now, what brings you here? Do you want to mess with me? Of course you're happy with your life. You bathe in happiness, and I'm all alone, with a certificate from prison. No mother, no father, not even a sister. Get out of here. I have no happiness. I had it, but now it's gone. Lynn died. Rob cried out in a strained voice. How did she die? Did Judith's curse work? And where is Cody? Peter turned sharply. Rob's face changed at these words. Which curse? What Cody? What are you even talking about? Peter looked puzzled at Rob. Lynn didn't tell you anything, right? Maybe she didn't have time. Let's go to the kitchen, pour some drinks and talk, Peter said. I don't drink, Rob refused. It's okay. Today you will, insisted the man. If they didn't tell you, then I will. I'll open your eyes so that life doesn't seem so rosy. Judith messed up a lot and drove herself to the grave, but you're still guilty of everything." Peter emptied his glass of whiskey, bit into a piece of black bread and continued. "When you left Judith, she completely lost it. She found a black magician and asked him to curse your family. She believed in this nonsense so much. She didn't want you to have children and dreamed of getting rid of your wife to take her place. She gave all her money to this charlatan. She even had to sell the car and take out loans. But it didn't bring her any happiness. She realized she was pregnant after your affair. She struggled penny by penny and worked as a cleaner and a janitor. I was in prison all that time, doing time, and couldn't help her in any way. I paced like a caged tiger, unable to escape." Rob listened, sometimes paling and sometimes blushing, and he couldn't believe that this was happening to him. Apparently the curse worked. They had no children with Lynn, and Lynn died suddenly as if someone had cursed her. Tears filled Rob's eyes. He poured whiskey into a glass and drank it in one gulp. "God, why? I didn't promise her anything, and Judith knew I didn't love her," he said. "Is her child really my son?" "Of course he's yours. Judith was faithful. She didn't want to hear about other men. And if you didn't love her, why did you sleep with her and just use her? And when she became unnecessary, you threw her away. That's what you got for everything." Seeing Rob's terrible condition, Peter added, "When Judith tried to punish you, she also punished herself. Suddenly she got sick and it turned out to be cancer. According to the doctor's prognosis, she had 3 months to live, but she lived for 6. We have no relatives, so not wanting to leave the child at the mercy of fate, Judith gave him to the orphanage. But her conscience ate her up. It's not godly to get rid of a child with a living father. At the last moment, she went and told everything to your wife." Suddenly, even Peter had a tear running down his cheek. "I was a week late. I was released, but I came not to her but to her grave. I was terribly sorry that my sister gave her child to the orphanage. But Lynn promised that everything would change soon. She was kind and compassionate, like an angel coming down from heaven. She said that as soon as you arrived from abroad, you would take your son. I arranged it and picked him up from the orphanage a couple of times on weekends. We walked in the park together. Cody was crazy about Lynn, and now there's no Lynn. The angel has flown away. Don't torture yourself, Peter. Thank you for everything." Rob couldn't listen any more. Sharp pain pierced his heart and soul, a wound that couldn't be drowned out with vodka. It was like a bleeding wound. It healed with a thin crust and then flared up again with renewed force. Rob didn't remember how he got home. The shower brought him back to his senses. Its cold streams refreshed not only his body but also his thoughts. He still didn't know and couldn't imagine how his future life would turn out. But of one thing Rob was sure. He would take his son from the orphanage and raise him properly. That's what he wanted, and that's what Lynn wanted. Today he dreamed of his beloved again, but for the first time it was a happy dream. They walked together holding hands and smiling at each other. The next day Rob returned to the orphanage to see his son. "Cody," he called out to the boy, who was standing alone in the hallway by the window. The boy turned around and ran up to him. "I knew you'd come back, Daddy." The child's admission was the greatest reward Rob could ask for. He hugged his son tightly, and the boy hugged him so tightly that it seemed impossible to let go. So, we'll live, Rob thought.